Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling drained, confused, or smaller than when you walked in, even though nothing bad was said? That feeling is not random. It's information. Most people think toxic behavior is obvious. They imagine yelling, insults, or dramatic conflict. But the most dangerous toxic people don't announce themselves. They don't raise their voice. They don't say cruel things out loud. They operate quietly, and that's why so many people miss the signs. Here's the truth. You don't spot a toxic person by what they say. You spot them by what happens to you when they're around. Notice how they handle silence. A healthy person is comfortable with pauses. A toxic person feels threatened by them. They rush to fill the space, interrupt, or steer the conversation back to themselves. Silence removes their control, and control is what they crave. Watch how they react when you don't explain yourself. You say no without a long story. You set a boundary without an apology. A healthy person adjusts. A toxic person pushes. They question. They guilt. They make your boundary feel like an attack, not with anger, but with disappointment, sarcasm, or concern. That reaction tells you everything. Toxic people are obsessed with leverage. They keep score. They remember favors not as kindness, but as currency. If you feel like you're always paying something back emotionally, you're not imagining it. Pay attention to consistency. Respect doesn't show up once. It shows up every time. Toxic people can be charming in public and draining in private. They know how to perform. What they can't do is sustain respect when no one is watching. Your body notices this before your mind does. Tight shoulders, shallow breathing, a sense of alertness that doesn't turn off. Books like The Gift of Fear remind us that intuition isn't mystical. It's your nervous system recognizing patterns faster than your logic can. Notice how they handle accountability. A toxic person rarely says, "I was wrong." They say, "That's not what I meant," or "You're too sensitive," or "Anyone would have done the same." They don't reflect, they deflect. And here's the most powerful part. You don't need to expose them. You don't need to argue. You don't need to explain. You simply become calm, clear, unavailable to manipulation. Toxic people depend on reactions, confusion, over-explaining, emotional engagement. When you stop providing those, they reveal themselves without saying a word. They get frustrated, distant, or suddenly critical, not because you did something wrong, but because you stopped being useful to their control. Confidence doesn't confront toxicity, it starves it. Remember this, healthy people feel safe when you grow stronger. Toxic people feel threatened, so trust what you notice. Trust how you feel, and understand this deeply. Protecting your peace doesn't require permission, proof, or explanation. It only requires awareness. Most people miss toxic behavior because they judge moments instead of patterns. One kind sentence, one helpful action, one calm conversation becomes the excuse we use to ignore everything else. But a person's character is never revealed in a single interaction. It's revealed in what repeats. A toxic person may apologize once, show kindness once, or appear supportive when it benefits them. That's not who they are. That's who they can be when they choose to be. What matters is what happens over time. Do you regularly leave conversations second-guessing yourself? Do the same issues keep resurfacing no matter how clearly you communicate? Do their promises sound familiar because you've heard them before, followed by the same behavior again? Patterns remove confusion. They show you whether someone is growing or simply managing impressions. Healthy people may stumble, but their direction changes. Toxic people repeat the same actions while expecting different forgiveness. When you stop judging isolated moments and start observing repeated behavior, clarity replaces doubt. And once you see the pattern, you don't need more evidence. Silence has a way of revealing what words try to hide. When you stop filling every pause, stop explaining every feeling, and stop rushing to make others comfortable, people show you who they really are. A grounded, healthy person doesn't panic when the conversation goes quiet. They stay present. They listen. A toxic person feels exposed in silence because silence removes their influence. Without your reactions, they lose control of the moment. You may notice them interrupting, changing the subject, making jokes, or subtly provoking you just to get a response. Not because they care about connection, but because they need engagement on their terms. Silence creates space, and space brings truth to the surface. When you don't defend yourself, over-clarify, or emotionally react, manipulation has nowhere to land. The discomfort you feel in those quiet moments isn't weakness, it's awareness waking up. Silence doesn't punish anyone. It simply reveals who respects you enough to sit with you and who needs noise to maintain power. The moment you set a boundary, the mask slips. You don't need to raise your voice or make a dramatic declaration. A simple, calm no is enough. A clear limit, stated without apology, acts like a mirror. A healthy person may be surprised, but they will respect it. They might ask a question, adjust their behavior, or take a moment to understand. A toxic person reacts differently. They hear a boundary as rejection or loss of control. Instead of respecting it, they challenge it. They push back gently at first, disguised as concern or confusion. They ask why, then keep asking why, not to understand, but to wear you down. They may guilt you, remind you of what they've done for you, or suggest you're being selfish or difficult. What's important is this: boundaries don't require approval. Anyone who insists on access to you after you've clearly limited it is showing you their priorities. Respect doesn't argue with clarity, it adapts to it. When someone treats your boundary as negotiable, they're telling you they value their comfort more than your well-being. And once you notice that, you don't need to defend your boundary, you simply need to keep it. Respect isn't loud, dramatic, or performative. It shows up quietly, in small moments that are easy to overlook if you're only paying attention to big gestures. A respectful person listens without planning their next interruption. They remember what matters to you without needing reminders. They don't dismiss your feelings, even when they don't fully understand them. Toxic people often rely on occasional grand gestures to distract from daily disregard. They may praise you publicly but interrupt you privately. They may offer help once, then ignore you when it's inconvenient. Consistency is the difference. Real respect doesn't depend on mood, audience, or advantage. It doesn't disappear when you disagree or stop being useful. When someone truly respects you, you don't feel the need to stay alert or guarded around them. You feel steady, seen, at ease. If respect only appears when it benefits them, it's not respect at all, it's strategy. Over time, small behaviors tell the truth louder than any promise ever could. Taught control rarely announces itself. It doesn't usually come with commands or threats. It arrives quietly, disguised as concern, advice, or charm. A toxic person doesn't need to tell you what to do. They guide you there by shaping how you feel. They ask questions that lead instead of listen. They offer help you didn't ask for, then make you feel ungrateful for not taking it. They frame their preferences as what's best for you, slowly training you to doubt your own judgment. Over time, you may notice you're choosing words more carefully, adjusting your tone or avoiding certain topics just to keep the peace. That's not compromise, that's conditioning. Healthy influence empowers you to think clearly and act freely. Manipulation does the opposite. It creates confusion, obligation, and emotional debt. The most telling sign is how subtle it feels. If you can't quite explain what's wrong but you feel less like yourself, control is already at work. And once you see it, you realize manipulation doesn't rely on force. It relies on access. When you limit that access, the power disappears. Before your thoughts catch up, your body already knows. That tightness in your chest, the tension in your jaw, the sudden drop in energy when someone enters the room, those are not coincidences. They're signals. Your nervous system is constantly scanning for safety, and it doesn't need words to recognize threat. Around healthy people, your body settles. Your breathing slows, your shoulders drop. Around toxic people, your body stays alert, even if the conversation seems polite on the surface. You may feel the urge to over-explain, to prove yourself, or to stay guarded without knowing why. That's because your body has noticed inconsistencies your mind is still trying to rationalize away. We're often taught to ignore these sensations and trust logic alone, but logic can be talked into excuses. Your body doesn't negotiate, it responds. When you start honoring those physical cues instead of dismissing them, clarity comes faster. You stop forcing comfort where it doesn't exist. You stop questioning your instincts. And you realize that awareness isn't emotional. It's biological. Your body isn't being dramatic. It's being honest. Accountability is where most toxic behavior collapses. When a healthy person makes a mistake, they pause, reflect, and take responsibility, even when it's uncomfortable. They care more about repairing trust than protecting their image. A toxic person does the opposite. The moment accountability appears, they shift the focus. They explain instead of acknowledge. They justify instead of apologize. They turn the conversation toward your reaction rather than their action. You may hear phrases that sound reasonable but lead nowhere, leaving the issue unresolved and strangely turned back on you. Over time, this pattern teaches you to stay quiet just to avoid the exhaustion of never being understood. Real accountability doesn't argue with impact. It doesn't minimize, compare, or distract. It simply owns the moment and changes behavior moving forward. When someone consistently avoids that responsibility, no amount of patience or communication will create growth. Accountability isn't a skill problem. It's a values problem. And recognizing that saves you from waiting for change that was never coming. Calm confidence has a way of unsettling people who rely on control. When you stay grounded, speak clearly, and don't rush to defend yourself, insecurity has nowhere to hide. Toxic individuals often depend on emotional reactions to feel powerful. Confusion, frustration, self-doubt. When those reactions don't appear, they become exposed. You'll notice subtle shifts. They may try to provoke you with sarcasm, dismissiveness, or small jabs meant to pull you off center. Or they may suddenly withdraw because without emotional leverage they feel irrelevant. Calm confidence isn't silence born from fear, it's stillness rooted in self-trust. You're not cold, you're clear, you're not passive, you're present. This kind of energy doesn't argue, chase, or prove, it simply stands. And standing calmly reveals the truth. Manipulation needs